Hello, and welcome to the LSR Podcast, episode number 271. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. With me, I have two of those in Pat Evans and Sam McQuillan. Boys, episode 271 will have a lot of California. It will have a lot of state updates from Pat, everything that's going on there, and then we will end on even more prediction market stuff as well. But let's get going over there in California. Lots to talk about. And Sam, we'll go ahead and start with the AG that said the crackdown is a coming.
Yeah, California, first of all, we all know it's one of the most important states yet to legalize sports betting. It's supposed to be a gold mine whenever it does. And in the meantime, it's had a lot of sports betting adjacent activity going on, whether that's daily fantasy sports, whether it's pick'em daily fantasy sports, companies like Underdog and Prize Picks, or sweepstakes models, which we've seen some activity taken against, and more recently prediction markets. Basically, it's this huge kind of, legal gray area and huge ground for all these companies to come in and serve a product that caters to sports betting as much as possible. Now, for years, there has been contention over whether or not daily fantasy sports is in fact legal. This, again, goes down to the game of skill versus game of chance debate, which has been worked out in a bunch of states throughout, the past decade and a half. You have a patchwork of state laws, some saying it is, some saying it isn't. Eventually, California wrestled with the issue. And just this past month, the Attorney General came out and said that daily fantasy sports are in fact a form of gambling and thus illegal under his interpretation of the law. Lo and behold, the daily fantasy sports companies, Underdog, Prize Picks, FanDuel, and DraftKings have not left the state. Some of them have tweaked their games a little bit, but they're kind of waiting for the next action to come. And this past week, the Attorney General said there will be action coming for those companies that have stayed in the state, despite his legal opinion. Now, a judge recently ruled that the opinion of an attorney general does not carry the weight of the law and cannot enforce it if there is an enforcing body in the state. So there's a lot of blurry lines, semantics, and different things that different folks will argue about why they're allowed to stay in the state. I imagine the fantasy sports companies are going to say that the attorney general is overstepping his boundaries and going beyond the law, trying to create his own law. The attorney general has said publicly that he's just trying to interpret the law, and he was asked by several lawmakers to do so, and that's why he's doing it. So we are now waiting to see what exactly enforcement will look like in the state, what exactly he can do. It's very unclear. He hasn't said what he'll do. In some cases, you've had attorney generals send cease and desist orders. Sometimes companies defy those and keep operating, and then lawsuits are threatened, and then kind of deals are worked out in the back room. It's kind of what we saw in Florida when a bunch of fantasy sports companies were asked to leave that state. Could be something we see here. We could also see some more lawsuits trying to stop him from enforcing his opinion. We saw Underdog try to stop the opinion from coming out, which led to the ruling from the judge that kind of clarified that there's even less clarity around this enforcement situation than we previously knew. So it's going to be a big mess and a big battleground. And like you say, or like to say, Pat, or Matt, actually, there will be lawyers. This is not the last we've heard about this. And it's only going to get murkier and murkier. And especially when you factor in the fact that the attorney general is running for re-election in 2026, and the tribes, which do not like fantasy sports, do not like what they see as unlicensed sports betting, they have supported him with a lot of money as well. So it's going to be quite the messy situation in California, to say the least.
Yeah, we will get to some more of that tribe information here in just a second. You mentioned some of the tweaks that were out there. Underdog did go peer-to-peer with their games over there in California. So there are people that are making some moves depending on what may or may not go down there in California. But as you mentioned, Sam, it is incredibly important for not only your DFS plus providers, your picks providers that are out there, but also even just the DraftKings and FanDuels of the world, considering they are able to at least have some sort of interaction with the people there in the state of California. Pat, we could almost do a separate podcast that is just based on prediction markets and sweeps. It seems like basically the like most of the stories are around that these days. And so in California, we might as well go ahead and hit on what's going on with sweeps.
Yeah, of course. I mean, to your point, sweepstakes has been one of the biggest topics of discussion for the last year in the industry, online gambling industry, period, because, of course, they have found a way to basically offer gambling without regulations. It's pretty wild. And so what you have in California is, not unlike a lot of other states this year, a bill that proposes a ban on the sweepstake operators. 5 other states did pass it. New Jersey, Louisiana did, but governor vetoed it, but said that's because the gambling regulators have the enforceable abilities, and they sent out 40 cease and desists right after that, and sure enough, that happened. So what happened was about a month ago, maybe more. I don't really understand how time works anymore, just because time just flies by, and who knows when things happen anymore. A bill was amended with language to ban the sweepstakes in California. It was a tribal gaming related bill, so it's not completely unrelated, but it did not contain this language before. But it was after it passed the House already, so it's in the Senate. It's passed 2 committees now. Both have seen, unanimous passage in those committees, but there's still hesitancies of, hey, why are we doing it this kind of backdoor way, amending a bill that was unrelated? And also, what kind of unintended consequences are we going to have in this language? Of course, the industry groups that represent sweepstakes operators have all said, this affects Starbucks and McDonald's monopoly and all the other things. I don't think it really does ultimately when you look at the language, but you never know. One of the committees did make an amendment to take out persons because they didn't want, somebody using it to get in trouble if they don't want to. The legislator said this is really about tackling the companies that are offering things illegally, or at least in the gray area, and many of them are offshore, so we don't want that. But we don't want Californians individually to be targeted just because they maybe made a mistake by accidentally going to this and unknowingly doing something illegal. So there's that. That also probably lets the celebrities who are endorsing these things off the hook. The Ryan Seacrests of the world and the like. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, I know, right, Sam? Oh, forbid he gets in trouble. So we'll see. Does it, get past the Senate? What ultimately happens? Of course, that's why we watch these things and keep track of them, because anything during a legislative session can happen.
Yeah, tons of stuff going on there in California. One more, of course, Sam, is we said we would circle back to the prediction markets, and Kalshi and Robinhood are under fire from the tribes.
Yeah, I feel like this completes the trifecta we just talked about. Tribal support against daily fantasy sports. Pat just mentioned tribal support against sweepstakes, and now we're talking about tribes fighting prediction markets. So all 3 forms of sports betting adjacent kind of platforms, or platforms that are trying to cater to the same audience and not necessarily follow the same rules, because obviously sports betting is illegal in California. And that's what's happening with this lawsuit that 3 Native American tribes just filed in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, which, not unlike other lawsuits we've talked about on this podcast, is seeking to stop Kalshi and their distribution partner Robinhood. This, of course, is the e-commerce trading app, stock trading app, or website from offering prediction markets in the state. And they argue that it is a form of illegal sports betting. It's unlicensed. And because it's happening in California and serving people in California, it's violating not just tribal law, not just California law, but federal law as well, because you got to remember that the tribal framework that oversees gambling in the states is like federally agreed upon. And so there's multiple entities that are being kind of encompassed by this lawsuit, which makes it different than some of the other ones we've seen in Nevada, New Jersey. And I believe these prediction markets are also fighting similar lawsuits in other states, although those have less to do with, whether it's a form of unlicensed gambling. So what's going to happen here is the big question. Will this lawsuit be different? You've got the tribes opposing it. You've got the CFTC, which is the prediction markets say regulate it. CFTC has not weighed in or really done anything in this space yet. And I think because, again, it's California and we've seen those other states, we've had judges rule basically allowing these companies to keep operating while the lawsuits play out. It might be different in this case because it's, the tribes involved and it's IGRA, it's federal lawsuits or federal laws that are getting involved here as well. So again, it all ties back to, the tribal interest in the state and, how much money is at stake here. So it's going to be a really interesting one to follow, and completes that kind of trifecta of anti-sports betting adjacent industries under fire right now in the Golden State.
However, if you think that is the last time that we're going to talk prediction markets on this podcast, you are sadly mistaken. We will be swinging back around, and there will be multiple more stories that we will be talking about with prediction markets here in just a bit. But Pat, let's get to our state updates. We have Missouri, we've got Georgia, we got Maine, we got Ohio, and then we got a New Jersey assemblyman who's coming out and he's wanting to amend some of the bets that are allowed there in the state. So let's kick things off.
Yeah, let me take a deep breath here before I just let out my giant windbag here. Missouri, we are whirling towards legalized sports betting. Thankfully, after years and years, I remember basically right after I started here in 2021, we were talking about which state would legalize first, Kansas or Missouri. Of course, Kansas has been live now for many years, basically, and Missouri is now just getting there. Right after the voters approved it in November, we thought maybe, okay, they'll be up by the summer because that's kind of the timeline a lot of states have followed, is just a couple of months. Sure enough, Denny Hoskins reared his head, came in, said emergency rules are not needed, which actually kind of makes sense. It's not a crucial industry by any means. So sure enough, we had to wait for a long time. But those proposed rules have been gone through their public comment period. There was a hearing held where nothing was said, which was incredible. One of the most boring hearings I've ever watched, and that's saying something. We've got we've got 3 applications in for the two untethered sports betting licenses, FanDuel, DraftKings, which you have to imagine those two are probably the front runners as they basically funded all $44 million or whatever it was in the ballot initiative. But also Circa came in for one of those untethered licenses in the last minute. We'll find out which two get that license again, who knows how time works, but we're basically in August. We'll find out in August. And then September 12th is the date for the rest of the applications, which will be tethered to teams and casinos. And then, of course, we've been confirmed a launch of December 1st, which is the last legal day, which is legally binding in the legalese framework of launch is December 1st. And that's when they say they're going to launch. So we're going to miss most of the football season, but hey, at least it's here.
I just got back from Missouri, actually, went on my annual golf trip there, and I was talking to the people in Missouri about this, and they were, some of them had forgotten that it had even been passed and that they were going to be able to do it. Like, literally, they were, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Like, I can't even believe that was a deal. Others pointed to the fact that they, in 2022, legalized recreational marijuana, and apparently those stands were like popping up in 20 minutes after the law passed or whatever. They're
right.
like we had recreational marijuana in 12 minutes, but yet this sports betting thing had been going on forever. But at least it looks like we are coming to the long drawn out end to all of this.
It sure does. I'm excited to see them finally get it and I guess have their marijuana too. I don't know. Georgia, there was a meeting on yesterday, Monday. We're recording this on Tuesday. It's a House Study Committee on Gambling in Georgia, I think is the official title. It's a crazy long title. Basically, just looking back at the last 5 years or whatever efforts of trying to legalize casinos and sports betting and what have you in Georgia and just never getting any united front of saying, hey, this is the way we do it. They're going to keep meeting through December 1st, issue some recommendations, and we'll see what happens. There is a bill still on the legislative docket that carries over to the next year that would include the constitutional amendment, which would then have to put the issue to voters in November next year. So there's no real time frame screwing up by not doing it this year. It's not a big deal. But that would create up to 16 licenses for sports betting in Georgia, 24% tax rate. So we'll see what the recommendations are when it comes down in December. But yeah, they're going to keep meeting. On Monday, they talked mostly about casinos, casino gaming. We'll hear Pure Mutual and online sports betting in the coming weeks and months. But interesting that they finally put together a study to say, okay, things aren't getting done, so maybe let's talk about it in depth where there's not a vote riding on it, and then we can make recommendations. So that's in Georgia. In Maine, one of the few states that we saw any positive momentum on online casino. It did end up passing both the Senate, the House, got to that weird appropriations table they have up there that a very few amount of bills pass. It passed and got to Governor Janet Mills, who has decided not to act on it and just basically table it until the next legislative session where she might veto it. And I don't think there was enough support in either chamber to get over a veto. She is not a super friendly to gambling issues. She was the one who signed sports betting into effect, but that was more of a tribal sovereignty issue, not a pro-gambling situation. So we'll see what happens there, but it's just sitting in purgatory, and we'll see what happens. Doesn't seem promising for those who did want online casino in Maine. Speaking of online casino, Governor Mike DeWine in Ohio came out recently and said, no, I don't like this. I don't use the word veto much, but this is probably an issue that I would. Not totally surprising. He's been the one just cranking up or wanting to crank up tax rates on sports betting. I guess he just doesn't approve of the issue, but more importantly, to online casino in specific, he said, I don't like the idea of giving our constituents access to gambling 24/7 in their pockets. It's going to improve or increase problem gambling and addiction. So let's not do that. So that's there in Ohio. And then, in New Jersey, we've got a bill that came out to say, let's ban, in-game betting, the micro betting, and kind of a similar kind of issue that to DeWine in Ohio saying, this is just kind of encouraging impulsive behavior in gambling. And if you can bet on every pitch and every play on a football game and what have you, what does that do to problem gambling, numbers and the like? And that's not totally surprising. There's been a lot of bills in New Jersey that have passed this year. Sweepstakes ban. Speaking of sweepstakes, tax hike there for gambling. Prohibition on advertising for sports betting on college campuses. So they're kind of tightening the regulations there in New Jersey. So I wouldn't totally be surprised if this one gets through as well, just based on the headwinds we're seeing on online gambling and the impulsiveness that people are citing for addictions and the like. So a lot going on. And I don't think we're going to see anything slow down here in the future either.
I hear often and we've heard this a ton from the people who are anti-online casino, but I don't like the fact that, you can just, you have a casino 24/7 in your pocket. We haven't had anyone come back and be like, okay, let's make it to where it's 9 to midnight, whatever. It's like 9 a.m. to midnight, whatever. If someone can't gamble before they go to work and then at midnight, hey, we just shut it off. It's a hard shut off. And then you go on with your life or something. I'm sure if it becomes a deal of people worried about how often it can be available, maybe we can meet in the middle and there's just business hours or something for online.
Yeah, well, there's even the group of casino operators, brick and mortar casino operators who say, one of the things about brick and mortar casinos is the amount of friction there is to say, hey, are you sure you want to bet? Are you sure you want to bet? Do you need to do this? Can't you just put in a lot more friction points in the app too? That kind of is annoying and you don't want to do that all the time. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, we certainly can. Listen, I can land a rover on the moon with my cell phone. We can certainly put in friction points for betting and whatever and stuff like that. Yes, this can happen for sure. As we said earlier in the podcast, we were not done with prediction market. So let's head on back here, Sam, and one we hadn't talked about in a hot minute. Let's go to Polymarket.
Yeah, Polymarket, it's interesting. It's one of the famous ones. You think about Polymarket, you think about Kalshi, you think about how they really became famous was, during presidential elections and other U.S. elections, basically billing themselves as a way to allow you to bet on the election. That was kind of worked out through courts where they came to the determination eventually that it wasn't technically betting, although often it's marketed as betting and it's more of an investment and buying a sort of a stock or a position on something. So they've been out of the U.S. for a long time, part of an agreement or a settlement they had with federal prosecutors actually since 2022. They had to pay some money for, offering markets that, weren't properly registered. They've been outside of the U.S. kind of looking for an entry point back in. And this all comes back to sports, because January is when their rival Kalshi eventually, or finally, kind of out of nowhere, launched their sports prediction markets, first on the Super Bowl, and then there was just some friction from the CFTC. They asked them not to do that, and then they kind of said okay, and then the CFTC didn't do anything. They came back and did it, and now it's like 40 of the top 41 markets on their website, Kalshi, are all sports. So it's quickly ballooned into this giant industry for Kalshi. They're not slowing down anytime soon. In the past 6 months, basically prediction markets have become sports betting. And so it's no coincidence that now Polymarket wants to come back when there is a real gigantic market for this. It's really interesting. They're known as kind of an election or presidential betting kind of thing. So you would think, why would they come back now when there is no presidential election in the near future? There's no major kind of, other elections you would bet on it. It's because likely they want to get into sports. They just paid $112 million for an exchange called QCX, which is based in Florida, and it was actually approved earlier this month by the CFTC to add these prediction markets. So effectively purchasing this gives Polymarket an entry point back into the US. They actually just announced that they're an investigation into whether or not they violated the terms of their settlement. That was closed with federal prosecutors. So it kind of seems like all systems are go for them any day now to launch a sports prediction market, as well as other political prediction markets in the US as well. But this comes after they just raised $200 million in funding in April, which valued the company at $1 billion. So it's a huge change from, they weren't even allowed to operate in the US, and all of a sudden they're raising money, and obviously they used a big portion of that to return to the US eventually. So it seems like only a matter of time before they'll launch this prediction market. Actually, shout out to Sportico, did a really interesting article about how Polymarket has slowly been spending a lot of money advertising in the US, targeting users, even though they haven't been able to cater to the US yet. So this was always a thing where they're going to come back, and obviously they were spending money doing it as well. And it's kind of ironic. Kalshi sort of cleared the way for prediction markets to kind of operate without regulation, even though they say they're regulated by the CFTC. The CFTC hasn't done anything with them. And now one of their biggest rivals is coming back sort of because of that. So I'm really interested to see, when we have a Kalshi and a Polymarket both competing in this space. Does this raise attention? Does this raise awareness? Does this get more lawsuits going? Does this get more money from, the Wall Streets of the world, the financial sectors? There's been some partnerships that both just did with Elon Musk's XAI as well. So it's a lot of money being pooled in. Kind of wonder, when the bubble bursts and, when there's a pushback. But so far they've been, kind of operating sort of laissez-faire without any kind of parameters from the CFTC. So we'll have to see if eventually that changes. Yeah.
Who will attend Hulk Hogan's funeral? One of the markets up currently right now. John Cena is 76 cents on the yes. Sylvester Stallone is 72 cents on the yes. Donald Trump only 41 cents on the yes, 60 cents.
I guess he's pretty busy these
on
days.
the no. So yeah, so it's a little less than 50-50 that Donald Trump is going to be there for the Hulkster's funeral. Sam, let's put a bow on this one and just more prediction market stuff. But as we said, it is an entry point into states that does not have legalized on the books sports betting, and so DraftKings is looking around right now.
Yeah, it's a distinction you rightly make, Matt. Legal on the books sort of sports betting, kind of sports betting as we know it, sports betting in name versus these other products, which are sports betting not in name, but sort of in practice and catering the same people. DraftKings obviously does a lot of sports betting, and, they've looked at other sort of adjacent products to get into states like California, to get into states like Texas, where they already offer fantasy, but they've looked at the pick'em model. They have their own peer-to-peer pick'em, but they haven't done the player versus house thing. And I think a lot of sports betting companies that maybe have wanted to do that haven't, because they don't want to piss off states. They don't want to act in bad faith if a state eventually does sports betting. But it seems to be a different case with prediction markets so far. Kind of these companies like DraftKings saying, if the feds, if the CFTC is going to say that this is different and it's not governed by the states, why would we not get into this? And there was a report out earlier this month that DraftKings is trying to acquire Railbird, which is like QCX, which we just talked about with Polymarket, another recently licensed federal prediction market exchange. So theoretically, buying this company would allow DraftKings to offer a product that is not technically sports betting, but very much functions like sports betting in all 50 states versus I think they only operate in 37 right now. So this is very interesting because DraftKings is one of those companies along with FanDuel and BetMGM that is reportedly working on a deal with the tribes of California to eventually get sports betting. Now, that wouldn't happen until probably 2028. It would take a long time first to hammer out the deal, and it would give tribes a lot of the money. DraftKings and company like FanDuel and everyone else have kind of been working to mend their relationships with the tribes in the state ever since they really pissed them off and try to get sports betting legalized on the ballot without them and cutting them out. And they were humbled when they learned that the tribes were able to kind of block that and spend a lot of money defeating them and kind of have their tail between their legs. And now we're reportedly in talks with the tribes to work that out. So now if we have DraftKings come into California while that deal is still being worked out with their own prediction market platform, offering a sports product that we just talked about, the tribes are suing to stop. I wonder what would happen with that good faith they're working on with the tribes and what happens to that deal, especially if other companies, that are working on that deal as well, don't do this kind of thing. Would it squeeze DraftKings out of the deal? I'd have to think that, they're being very smart about this and they wouldn't be, pissing off the tribes if they could help it. But maybe this is something where they're looking at, this is just going to give us all of the revenue in a state like California, all of the revenue in a state like Texas, when we don't need to fork over 50-60% to the tribes. Again, this isn't a product that I don't really think DraftKings cares about having in a state where there is sports betting. Maybe if there's a crazy high tax rate, but in a state like New York, where I am, I'm going to use a sports book instead of a prediction market. You just talked about, Matt, like 73 cents. That's a lot harder kind of just for the average casual sports bettor who's used to the app to then pivot over to that. So it goes into what these companies have kind of been saying is, our products are superior when people have the option of sports betting and the option of sports prediction markets. They're going to go with the better product, the better sports betting option, which I think is definitely true. But we see right now DraftKings kind of gearing up to add that product in states where it can't have the legit sports betting product here. So, and if DraftKings goes first, I think they certainly would not be the last. We've had FanDuel's executives have talked about doing something similar, maybe, and BetMGM CEO just recently spoke out and said they're not going to be the first to do this, but if everybody else does, they certainly won't be the last. So yeah, another interesting development, which wraps again into California and again into these prediction markets and sports betting adjacent products.
Pat, were you ever a pro wrestling guy?
No.
No, never. No. Even as a kid, didn't watch it.
No,
never got into it.
It never, tickled my fancy.
Never resonated. Sam, were you ever into the pro wrestling?
Oh yeah, I went to WrestleMania 23 in Detroit for my 13th birthday. I was a huge WWE fan all the way, I want to say until like 6th or 7th grade, until I kind of eventually I realized that it was fake, and then I was in denial, I think, for like a year or two about that. And it got to a point where I couldn't anymore. And then I kind of just I really just went the other way and didn't want anything to do with it. But I've come full circle in my old age.
I was weirdly into it as a kid, but never like a super Hulk Hogan guy for whatever reason. I don't know why. I know it seemed like you had to be a super Hulk Hogan guy, but for whatever reason, I wasn't a super Hulk Hogan guy. I just kind of liked it all and what was going on, but not necessarily like this guy was my favorite or this guy was my favorite or something. So yeah, I was never a Hulkamaniac, that never happened.
I was a Jesse Ventura guy just because of Predator. So
okay, well, Jesse Ventura hates Hulk Hogan. Yes.
Well, there you go. So okay,
with a passion, because I guess Hulk
we're on the same team.
I guess Hulk Hogan was the one who ratted Jesse Ventura out to Vince McMahon that Jesse Ventura was trying to start a union amongst the wrestlers or whatever. But that didn't help Hulk Hogan. He was already making money. Like that only helps everybody else, right? And so Hulk Hogan was like, wait, I'm gonna have to give some of my money to everybody else. That's not no. So he apparently he was the one who ratted Jesse Ventura out to Hulk Hogan. I mean to Vince McMahon for all of that stuff. So.
Ironically, two of the most political wrestlers in their post-wrestling career as well, Hulk Hogan and Ventura, I think, who is the governor of some
Minnesota.
state?
Minnesota. Yeah, Minnesota. He went off and he went and did things. So apparently not getting the union thing that wasn't like the end of his career for sure.
Right. He went even harder.
Yeah. Guys, we talk about this each and every time we do this podcast, but appreciate you listening. Appreciate you subscribing. If you go ahead, if you rate and review, that helps as well. But head on over to Legal Sports Report and read all of the words that these guys are putting on the page over there. They are reading the stuff, listening to the stuff, summarizing the stuff so that you do not have to. So appreciate all of that hard work over there. For Pat, for Sam, I am Matt. See you guys next week.